Have you ever wondered what would happen if you stopped showing up? Not out of anger, not because of drama or spite, but just because you needed to breathe. Imagine a single moment where, without warning, you go quiet. You stop explaining yourself. You stop chasing replies. You stop carrying the weight of everyone else's emotions like it's your duty. Not a disappearance in the physical sense. You're still there, still alive, still breathing, but something about you has shifted. The energy, the availability, the endless giving, it's gone. There's something hauntingly powerful about that idea, stepping away, not as revenge, not to punish, but to return to yourself. And what happens next? Everything around you reacts, like a pond that ripples not because something entered, but because something left. People start to notice the silence. They question your absence. They feel a strange discomfort creeping in, not because you hurt them, but because your absence denies them something they didn't even know they were taking. That's the strange paradox of human relationships. Sometimes the most profound impact you can have is when you're not there. This isn't about abandoning people. It's about recognizing the quiet revolution that begins when you detach. Because in the moment you stop performing the role others wrote for you, you begin to see who you really are. This video isn't going to offer the usual self-help advice. We're not talking about walking away from toxic people or setting boundaries for Instagram likes. No, we're diving deep into the psychology of absence, into the ripple effects of your silence, into the reason why your withdrawal sometimes speaks louder than all your words. So sit with this for a while. What if your greatest power was the ability to step away, not to escape the world, but to let the world reveal what you meant to it? Most of the connections we have with people aren't made of words. They're made of something quieter, more elusive. Expectations, routines, silent understandings. We don't notice them until they tighten, until we try to step back and feel the resistance. You see, relationships, even the kindest ones, often operate on invisible contracts, not written, not spoken, but deeply felt. You play a role, the confidant, the problem solver, the one who always understands, the one who always answers, and the longer you play that role, the more it becomes who you are to others, sometimes even to yourself. But here's the truth. That identity isn't always real. It's a version of you created to hold someone else's world together. A mirror they lean on, a hand they pull without asking, and over time, you start to forget that you were never obligated to carry them. You just did. Out of love, out of habit, out of fear that stepping back might collapse the whole thing. And so the threads grow stronger, thicker, woven not from affection alone, but from silent obligation. And before you realize it, your presence is no longer something shared, it's something expected. That's the hidden weight we rarely talk about, not the loud fights or the obvious drama, but the subtle erosion of your inner space, one favor, one compromise, one "I'm fine" at a time. It's not that people are cruel. Most of them don't even know they're doing it. They just grew used to you being there, used to you holding space for their fears, their failures, their storms. And in return, what did you receive? Was it balance? Was it mutual care? Or was it silence when you needed holding? The hardest part about stepping away isn't the act itself. It's realizing how deeply entangled you were in invisible threads no one acknowledged. You weren't just connected, you were bound. And the moment you move, even slightly, those threads pull back. Not because you broke something, but because you finally saw it for what it was. Something strange happens the moment you step away. Not with noise, not with drama, but with silence. A shift, not in you, but in the room, Marta, you left behind. You may think your absence would be a quiet thing. You may imagine people moving on, barely noticing, life continuing as it always has. But that's not what happens. Instead, something wobbles, like a table missing one of its legs, like a painting taken off the wall, leaving behind an outline that wasn't visible before. Suddenly your absence is louder than your presence ever was, not because you shouted, but because you held something crucial, something invisible. and no one realized until it was gone. People feel it in different ways. For some, it's confusion. Why did they pull back? For others, it's panic. Did I do something wrong? And for a few, it's anger. How dare they? But beneath all those reactions is one common thread: discomfort. Not the kind that comes from missing your laugh or your advice, but the kind that comes from being forced to stand on emotional ground they didn't build themselves. You were the cushion, the emotional safety net, the one who answered late-night calls, smoothed over tensions, filled silences that made others uneasy. When you step away, all of that stops. And now they have to sit with the echo. That echo is powerful because it's not just about you being gone, it's about what your presence allowed them to avoid. Maybe it was loneliness, maybe it was their own doubts, maybe it was a truth about themselves they weren't ready to face. Whatever it is, now it's there in the open, uncovered, and you didn't have to say a word. You didn't need to accuse or explain. You simply left, and everything began to rearrange itself. This is what most people don't understand. Absence doesn't create a void. It reveals one that was already there, and in that space, truth rushes in, uninvited, unfiltered, uncomfortable. So if you've ever stepped away and been surprised by the reaction it triggered, remember this: it wasn't about you leaving. It was about what your leaving revealed. People don't always miss you. They miss who they got to be when you were around. That's the uncomfortable truth. You see, whether we realize it or not, we're all mirrors for each other. Not just reflections of beauty and joy, but of doubt, of need, of fear, of hope. And when someone looks at you, they're not just seeing you. They're seeing a version of themselves, filtered through how you respond, how you smile, how you listen, how you care. It's never just about your presence. It's about what your presence allowed them to feel about themselves. And so, when you step away, it's not just you that disappears. It's the mirror, the one they didn't know they were using, the one that made them feel stable or lovable or strong or in control. Without it, they're left looking inward, and for many, that's terrifying, because now there's no one there to validate the stories they've been telling themselves, no one to play the role they cast you in, no one to nod silently while they pretended they were okay. And without that reflection, they're forced to see what's really there. Maybe it's insecurity, maybe it's emptiness, maybe it's the gnawing realization that the connection they relied on wasn't as mutual as they imagined. When you leave, the spell breaks, and suddenly the projection collapses. That's why some people respond to your absence with confusion. They changed, they'll say, but maybe you didn't change at all. Maybe you just stopped playing the role they assigned to you. You stopped holding up the mirror, and now they're left with their own unfiltered image, raw, unlit, unfamiliar, and it hurts, not because of you, but because of what you helped them avoid. And here lies the paradox. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to remove the mirror, to let people see themselves without you, because maybe that's what they needed all along. Not another reflection, but a moment of truth. When you leave, people don't sit with silence. They fill it, quickly, instinctively, desperately, because silence is dangerous. It doesn't give them anything to hold on to. And so, they invent something. They build a story. But here's the part they'll never admit. The story isn't about you. It's about what makes them feel better. For some, you become the villain, cold, selfish, distant. They'll say, you abandoned us, even if all you did was breathe for once. For others, you become the hero they never deserved. Your absence gets romanticized. Suddenly you were too good for them, too kind, too rare. They mourn you like a ghost, one they never appreciated when you were real. And then there are the ones who try to erase you completely. Pretend you were never that important. Pretend your role in their life was minor, forgettable. They do this not because you meant nothing, but because you meant too much, more than they were comfortable admitting. This is how people cope with the discomfort of your withdrawal. They create myths. not to understand you, but to protect their version of reality. Because facing the truth would mean facing something inside themselves. And truth is sharp. It cuts through the fog of excuses. It shows them how much they leaned on you, how much they expected from you, how little they gave back. And so, rather than say, "I depended on you more than I realized," they'll say, "You changed." Because that feels safer, that gives them control, that lets them walk away without guilt. But here's what you need to remember. The story they tell about your absence is not your responsibility. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that keeps them comfortable. Let them tell their stories. Let them write you as villain, ghost, savior, stranger. None of it is real. Because truth isn't in the stories they create. It's in the silence you left behind. The silence that made them look deeper than they wanted to. It's easy to think people are upset because you're gone, that they miss your voice, your presence, your warmth. But more often than not, that's not what's really hurting them. What stings is something far more subtle, something almost unnameable. It's not about missing you, it's about missing what they used you to avoid. Your presence, whether you knew it or not, was a kind of shield. It protected them from loneliness, from responsibility, from their own internal chaos. When you were there, they didn't have to look inward. They had you. And that was enough to silence the discomfort. But now you're not there. And in the space you left behind, there is no distraction, no one to lean on, no one to absorb the weight they refuse to carry themselves. And that's when the real hurt begins. Not because you hurt them, but because your absence unmasks them. It strips away the illusion that they were whole on their own. It shows them with painful clarity that they had built their emotional balance on the foundation of you. And now that foundation is gone. What remains is instability, a feeling of being unmoored, like a raft cut loose from the dock, drifting into unfamiliar waters. It's not your fault, but it is your effect. That's the real reason your distance hurts them, not because they loved you deeply, though some might have, not because you betrayed them, though they may say you did, but because your presence covered up a truth they weren't ready to see. They were relying on you to hold themselves together, and the moment you stepped away, the mask slipped. The truth came pouring in, and it was terrifying. It's easier to say, "You abandoned me," than to say, "I didn't know how to exist without you." Easier to blame your silence than to confront their own. But you didn't cause the wound. You simply stopped being the bandage. And in doing so, you revealed where the pain had always been hiding. It's easy to focus on what your absence does to others, the discomfort it stirs, the myths it exposes, the balance it unsettles. But let's be honest, the moment you step away, something awakens in you too. Because silence doesn't only echo outward, it echoes inward. And sometimes the void you leave behind in others is the same one you've been avoiding in yourself. Maybe you've been the strong one for too long. Maybe you've defined yourself by what you do for others. Maybe you were afraid that if you stopped showing up, you'd disappear, not just from their lives, but from your own sense of worth. And now here you are, alone, unattached, listening to a silence that asks questions no one else ever dared to. Who am I without the roles I play? Who am I without being needed? Who am I when there's no one left to save? These questions aren't comfortable. They never are. Because stepping away doesn't just disturb the identities others built with you. It unravels the identity you built for them. But there's power in that unraveling. A raw, quiet power. Because the void isn't just emptiness. It's space. Space to feel, space to remember, space to rediscover who you were before you became everything to everyone else. And yes, it can be terrifying to sit with the stillness, to face the parts of yourself you've been too busy to notice. But within that discomfort, there is something sacred. There is healing. Not the kind that happens when someone comforts you, but the kind that happens when you finally stop pretending you don't need comforting. That's what most people don't understand. Stepping away isn't an act of abandonment, it's an invitation. for others to face their shadows, and for you to meet your soul. So if you're sitting in that quiet space now, don't rush to fill it. Don't run from the ache. Let it speak. Because sometimes the very thing you fear in solitude is the exact thing you need to find your way back to yourself. There's a quiet kind of strength that's born when you stop holding what was never yours to carry. Letting go isn't weakness, it's not indifference, and it's definitely not failure. Letting go is clarity. It's waking up one day and realizing that love doesn't have to mean sacrifice. That connection doesn't have to mean control. That being kind doesn't mean being consumed. And so, you loosen your grip, not because you don't care, but because you finally do, for yourself. You begin to understand something they never taught us, that self-preservation is not selfish, that peace is not a luxury, that your worth was never measured by how much pain you could absorb for others. And yes, people might not understand. They might say, "You've changed." They might call you distant, cold, even cruel. But deep down, you know, you've simply come home to yourself. Because for too long, your energy was spent patching holes in boats that were never yours, offering light to those who never stopped to ask if you were burning out, becoming a lifeline for others while silently drowning inside. Now you reclaim your time, your space, your breath, and something miraculous happens. You stop seeking validation from those who only valued the version of you that served them. You stop bending, shrinking, explaining, and instead, you expand. You rediscover the parts of yourself that were buried under obligation, the laughter that had gone quiet, the boundaries that had eroded, the dreams you'd postponed so others could feel more comfortable. This is what letting go really means. Not walking away in bitterness, but walking toward the life that's been waiting for you all along. And in doing so, something else shifts. Not just in you, but in the world around you. The relationships that survive this transformation will feel different, cleaner, freer, more honest. And the ones that fall away, they were never rooted in truth to begin with. They were rooted in need, in dependence, in illusion. So you let them fall, not with anger, but with peace. Because now you understand, your presence is not a debt. Your time is not an offering, and your love is not a leash. Letting go isn't the end. It's the beginning of everything real. Walking away isn't always dramatic. It doesn't have to be loud or final or theatrical. Sometimes it's as gentle as a breath, as quiet as a pause between heartbeats. It's a decision made not in defiance, but in grace. Because at some point you realize peace doesn't always come from fixing things. Closure doesn't always require a conversation. And healing begins the moment you stop waiting for others to understand why you needed to leave. There is an art to walking away, a sacredness to it. It's not about escape, it's about alignment. You don't leave because you're broken. You leave because you're ready to be whole. You don't step away to prove a point. You step away because you've finally understood yours. And the world will react. Let it. Let them whisper. Let them wonder. Let them tell stories that make sense to them. But you'll know the truth. You'll feel it in the stillness, in the lightness, in the breath you didn't realize you were holding until you finally let it go. There's no need to defend your distance. No need to apologize for your silence. You are allowed to choose yourself, to tend to your spirit, to be the keeper of your own peace. This is the quiet revolution, not the kind that changes others, but the kind that changes you. And in the end, that's what stepping away truly is. Not abandonment, not absence, but a return to your voice, to your power, to your center. So if you're standing on the edge, heart pounding, hands trembling, wondering if you have the right to walk away, you do. And when you do, the world might shake, but you will rise. Because the truth is this, sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is nothing at all. Just breathe, step back, and let the silence speak the words you no longer need to say.